Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of the Lord Ninja Choke MMA Picks podcast. I'm Dom, I'm in the US, and I'm joined by Will in the UK and Josh in Australia. And today we're going to be breaking down the final card of 2025, Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval, taking place at the Apex in Las Vegas this Saturday. So without any further ado, we're going to break down the majority of the fights. Starting with the main event here, in the flyweight division. Do either of you guys have a side here that you like?
Yeah, I have always been a huge backer of Manel Kape. I do think that he is going to hold the belt at one stage in his career. And against Royval, who is historically known to be hit a lot, he's tough, but being tough isn't everything in this sport. I do think that Kape and his background in kickboxing and Muay Thai is going to shine here. Like, no matter what Royval can do offensively, Kape can return fire in a much more cleaner, accurate way. And I just expect that we'll see a huge disparity in striking stats as the rounds go by, because Royval starts strong, but Kape has been always consistent in his output throughout those 3 rounds that he fights in. And even though he has a loss on his record against Muhammad Mokaev, because Mokaev is a crotch sniffer, that whole spiel, I do think that there is no wrestling here. And if there is, Kape has a great takedown defense, stat. And so, considering this fight's going to be a stand-up affair, in my opinion, I think that Kape is just going to shine. I mean, come on, Starboy, right? Like,
yeah, his takedown defense is 81% according to UFC stats. I don't know if that's visible on screen. Try and zoom in. So, yeah. What about you, Will? What's your take? You echoing Josh, or?
Definitely, in short, think that Manel Kape is the pick side. I find Royval really difficult. I find him one of the most difficult guys in the UFC to get a read on in terms of his upcoming fights, because he's not a specialist, he's not elite anywhere, but he's very well rounded and very scrappy. So, like, if your opponent is going to have an off day, Royval will be right there. I mean, we're recording this off the back of UFC 323 a couple of nights ago, and seeing what Tatsuro Taira did to Brandon Moreno, like, considering that he had a 5-round fight with Brandon Royval just a couple of years ago, it just goes to show that Royval is just supremely underrated somehow, whilst being as skilled as we know him to be. It's really odd. He just produces amazing performances occasionally that far exceed his ability. And I do really like Manel Kape. There's just something about him that I don't trust. I think that it's looking at his 3 losses, his output in those fights, and his just general enthusiasm to go out there and assert himself in a fight that is there for the taking. Very strange that he just sometimes doesn't have the enthusiasm to put his foot on the gas. The debut against Pantoja, I mean, I guess Pantoja's not the champion anymore, which feels so weird to say considering he didn't lose. But, like, Pantoja's a tough fight, I get that, but it was purely a striking fight, really, and, like, Kape just didn't seem to want it. I mean, 49 significant strikes in a 15-minute fight against a guy who's quite hittable is quite crazy. After that, he didn't really look too enthusiastic against Nicolau, a guy who we now know is quite chinny. That's a win he probably should have had in hindsight. And then the Mokaev fight, it was almost purely a striking fight, that Mokaev one, and he just got completely, like, bitched at range, and he did 20 significant strikes. It's a crazy low number for a, I remember that fight really was shit, wasn't it? It stunk. Like, Dana was so pissed off. But yeah,
they had an amazing build up for that fight, didn't they? There was all this stuff about getting hit in the toilets of the hotel they were staying in, or like Mokaev punched him in the back of the head or something. It was just ridiculous. There should have been, like, an all-out war. Instead, they just stared at each other.
I mean, that's probably on Mokaev being a having a very unique fighting style that's not particularly entertaining. But yeah, overall, I think that Manel Kape should, on a good day, demonstrate severe levels here in the striking and the ability to keep the fight where he wants it. But I just think he has the potential to be a flake. There's also that Felipe dos Santos fight that was very, very close when Santos came in his debut. Maybe that's also factoring in here, that I just think that he's just capable of laying a bit of an egg every now and again. So buyer beware. He's minus 300, I think, at the moment. That seems like a very steep number for a guy like Royval, who will just produce really good performances out of nowhere. So maybe it's not the best parlay leg, but for a pick, Kape probably is the side.
I mean, yeah, this is the early lean show, right? So we're just sort of beginning to form our analysis. And yeah, I mean, at first glance, I agree with both of you. Like, Kape seems to be the side. I just noticed, though, like, if you look at all his fights that he's had in the UFC, including he had a rough start, but then he kind of picked up. He hasn't been outside of the third round. So I imagine he has had 5-round fights, because I know that he was in Ryzen before. But it's been a while since he's been into the championship rounds. I'm pretty sure that Royval's going to take him there. I mean, he could clip Royval ahead of that. He's got heavy hands, of course. But Royval is like built for 5 rounds. He's like, he wears you down. And we saw what he did to Tyre. He made that good point, that the comparison between how Moreno did and how Royval did is quite stark. Take a look at Royval. He's been fighting, really high level competition in 5-round fights. Look, 3 of his last 5 fights went the distance. Took Pantoja to a decision. Split against Moreno over 5 rounds. Remember, that was a pretty close fight. Then, the split win over Tyra as well. And the epic war with Josh Van. And I think that's probably the only thing that's a bit concerning. Well, that was in June, so I guess he's had, 6 months to recover. But he took a lot of damage there. Look at this. 209 strikes. But he outlanded Josh Van, 216. So he's going to throw volume over 5 rounds, which as you just pointed out, 20 strikes over 3 rounds, pure, mostly standing against Mikhaev. So yeah, I think there's some warning signs here. So, happy to take Kape as the pick, but I agree with Will. I think this is not a good bet at this current price. Like, you're probably better off considering potentially a prop. I think probably Kape's, if he's going to win. Gosh, if it's a decision, I really think Royval's alive, right? So you probably got to go for the KO, right, Josh? You can't really be thinking Kape's going to outstrike him for 5 rounds when you haven't seen his cardio. Like, because he could, if the first 3 rounds, if he wins 2 of 3, I think 4 and 5 are going to go to Royval. We know Royval gets out of bed and runs 20 kilometers like no problem. So yeah,
I mean, Royval's got a chin though. That's the issue. Like, his whole narrative as a fighter of late has been durability and his ability to go the distance. So, as much as Kape has the ability to snipe at a boxing or kicking range, I don't think he can really damage Royval to the point to where the fight ends. I reckon it's going to be a tit for tat fight for 5 rounds. And even though you did raise concerns about Royval taking this fight to the distance and winning via decision, I do think that it's going to be competitive. And I feel like the UFC is pushing Kape, so maybe there might be some, I don't know, judging stuff going on. Like, I just think that visually, Kape might have the moment-to-moment, highlights that might skew the scorecards to his favor. So my thought is a decision win here. I mean, I would love to see a KO, but against Royval, I don't see it. Yeah.
Then in that case, a really good bet would be the points handicap, which will probably be plus money, because Brandon Royval sitting at plus 250 on the money line. So potentially get some sort of handicap where he only needs, 1 or 2 rounds, or if it's a close fight. Something to think about anyway. So, Will, if you don't disagree, we'll stick with Kape decision then.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm cool with that.
Okay, let's move on. Co-main event. Will, do you want to start us off? This is Giga Chikadze against Kevin Vallejos.
Yes, sir. I absolutely love the opportunity to talk about Giga Chikadze because I just can't stop ranting about this man. If you're somebody who's been a UFC fan for a decent enough stretch of time, you may remember when Chikadze came into the UFC. He was on one of the very early seasons of Dana White Contender Series, fought some pretty average bloke called Austin Springer. And despite looking like the very high-level kickboxer that we know him to be from day dot, he got taken down and absolutely ragdolled on the mat, and he got finished in a fight that he was dominating. Round 3 with 50 seconds to go, he got choked out. But yeah, I digress. But basically, the point I'm trying to make there is that the blueprint has been written on Giga Chikadze. Grapple this man. It's so obvious. You know, he comes into the UFC eventually and split decision against Brandon Davis. Brandon Davis did grapple him. And Brandon Davis is not a very good fighter. By UFC standard, probably one of the most underachieving fighters that we've ever had. Split decision. So the ceiling is not very high for Giga at this point. Then goes on to fight Jamal Emmers. Insanely bad fight IQ from Emmers in that fight. We've seen what he's capable of in his last fight against the guy's name escapes me, but he wrestle fucked him for 15 minutes and looked great doing so. Jamal Emmers is a very talented man, but he waited until round 3 to grapple Giga. And so basically, Hydra Mill, that's the guy. I've already deleted him from my memory because I'm disappointed in him from his last performance. But basically, in short, I'm not going to go through his entire career. If you have any ability to grapple this man. And that leads us into David Onama most recently. Onama lost the striking against Giga Chikadze in round 1, demonstrating that Chikadze, despite being a bit older and like the book being written on him, still very tricky guy to figure out when you're facing him inside the cage. But Onama switched it up, got some wrestling going in rounds 2 and 3, and turned the tide and won 29-28. Well played, David Onama. Like, it's good to see. You like to see some fight IQ. Kevin Vallejos is a hyped up prospect, but there's not really too much I can say about his actual ability, based off of evidence, because he's only had 2 UFC fights. I think one of them was an early finish, and the other one was against Danny Silva, who I couldn't really tell you anything about. Oh, Sungwoo Choi is who he finished. Choi's a scrappy guy, but is quite chinny and leaves himself open to getting KO'd. So he did what he had to do. So basically, you look at that record for Vallejos, and he could be the next Conor McGregor. He could also be the next Jordan Wright. It doesn't really mean anything to me. So, what I do think that's really interesting there is in that Danny Silva fight, he was dominating on the feet and looking really good, but he mixed in takedowns. And when he mixed in those takedowns, it changed the fight and made things so much more comfortable for him. And it's a very small amount of evidence, but I think that is a very key piece of information here. And Vallejos' ability to mix in some wrestling if he wants to. It's a fight IQ test, and if he can pass that fight IQ test, he should be beating Giga Chikadze because he's good enough striker to hold his own. But why risk it? Why enter into that tricky puzzle when you can just dominate or have success, one-sided success by wrestling? So I'm very much hoping that Vallejos passes this brain test. Essentially, is what I think this fight is, because the book is written on Chikadze. If you go out there and try to wrestle him, you will have success. Especially when he's a 6-inch reach disadvantage as well. It's so obvious to me that it's if you want this one to be tricky, stand and trade. It's just one of those things. I don't trust fighters when it comes to fight IQ. So I'm hesitant to say that Vallejos deserves to be the big favorite that he currently is, especially considering no one really knows that much about him at this level, especially not against a top 15 guy. But yeah, I expect Vallejos to get the job done. I do think he is on the up, and Chikadze's time in the sun is slowly coming to an end. But it all depends on how he approaches it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the line is moving in the same direction as it is with the main event. Chikadze is now plus 208. Josh, do you have any difference of opinion, or is it you feel much the same as Will?
I cannot think of any other way to really talk about this fight but to break it down analytically, because that's the only thing I can really see here. As much as I can see Vallejos winning because he is the younger person who has the momentum behind him, he has the wrestling chops, as Will mentioned. I look at Chikadze, I look at his reach and his height, and I'm like, I don't know if Vallejos is gonna walk away from this without being maimed. Like anytime that Vallejos is gonna enter Chikadze's range within the pocket, because obviously to wrestle, you gotta be in the pocket. I expect knees from Chikadze, and given the height advantage, I expect those knees to land. But I also expect Chikadze to eventually find himself flat on his back on the ground with Vallejos doing some ground and pound or whatever. So, as much as the odds say that Vallejos is likely to win, I don't want to doubt Chikadze here. Like, I am going to be picking Vallejos, of course, but I do think that Chikadze has a route to victory, and it's not like Chikadze is facing a wrestler for the first time or facing a younger opponent for the first time. He is older. He is reaching the end of his career, but I can't doubt my guy from Georgia here. Like, come on, don't do this to me, guys. Like I'm conflicted. I really am. I just want to see one more win from Chikadze this year. And even though looking at his record now, I see that his last win was against Caceres, and that's like a pretty sad win. Yeah, like when it comes to Vallejos, I understand the hype. Vallejos talks a lot of shit and gets himself hyped up for fights before the fight on social media, but 24 years old, shorter, somewhat inexperienced, maybe much more inexperienced if we include Chikadze's outside experience from like the mixed martial arts realm. I'm obviously going to be picking Vallejos here. Like it would be so uncharacteristic of me to pick an underdog here. So I will be taking Vallejos to win this one, but I just have my reservations because I don't want to leave the Giga kick train anytime soon.
Yeah, you know me, I'm always interested in any dog, but I think I cut it pretty close with the previous fight. I didn't bet on Giga Chikadze outright. I took his points handicap. I think I broke that fight down on this very podcast, and I said that it was going to be closer than the odds indicated. I think Giga Chikadze was plus 200 and something as well for the David Onama fight, and it turned out to be quite close, as you can see by the strike count. And the difference was absolutely, as Will mentioned, the takedowns. He did lose, I think, the first round, as you said, and then David and I managed to get the takedowns. In fact, he got one takedown in every round, but Giga Chikadze basically slowed down. That was what happened. And as you can see, he's never really been the same after this specific fight, which was this ironic, how MMA has these dichotomies, right? You have the Calvin Kattar fight, or Calvin Kattar, giving out the beating to Giga Chikadze, right? When Calvin Kattar was the one who, I think the fight before, fought Max Holloway and took his life beating. Actually, did this supersede that? Let's have a look. Yeah, it was just like straight after the Max Holloway one, he did the same thing to Chikadze, and he's never just really, like the Caceres thing, as you said, it was an anemic performance and was like really tentative. Both fighters didn't really commit to their strikes. It was a pretty poor fight. And then since then, he's lost to Allen in a fight which just got outworked. So yeah, I just find it really hard to see him winning. So definitely from a picks perspective, I'm with both of you. I think Vallejos is the side. I think it's a bit steep, but I can see minus 240 where it is now. Yeah, I think it would be quite surprising to me if Chikadze can pull this off. Like, I'm not writing him off, as you say, Josh. I will be rooting for him, provided I don't bet on Vallejos. But how do you think he gets it done? I guess decision is the most likely. It seems like Chikadze can stick around, unless you think this is it for him. We've seen chins crumbling recently. So, what do you reckon?
I'm gonna go against the tide here a bit, and I'm gonna predict a submission. Like, I reckon Vallejos in his younger self is gonna be cocky enough to try and do something like that, to try and prove to the world that he can be a champion or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, we see it with Abdul Malik just yesterday, right? He submitted Tricoli, even though that fight was comical in so many ways. I laughed. It was so funny. Just the way that he grabbed his neck and he was like, "Okay, I'm done." It's like fucking hell, fight already. But yeah, I'm going to call for a sub here. I'm probably going to be very wrong, but that's my opinion. You guys can supersede me here and all that stuff. So go on.
I feel bad, but I don't know if I can YOLO it like that. I was thinking the decision does sound like the logical pick, but I'm all about, just randomly going off piste like that. I mean, I'm sure you get good odds for that if you're really thinking of putting your money where your mouth is. But like, I feel like you have to go decision for like the pick perspective, right? Giga is very durable from a striking capacity, and also has done a decent job of staying safe on the mat even when he is taken down. So I don't know if I could trust Vallejos to be someone to be that good to submit.
Yeah, I think he's more of a stand-up fighter. Like you mentioned, the first time we've really seen him mix in the arts was his last fight. As you say, it kind of gives you the glimmer of hope, but it would be unwise to stand for 3 rounds. So if he takes it to the mat, I don't know what his level of jiu-jitsu is, and you can't just write off Chikadze and say he's going to give up a sub. He's always seemed to do the right things on the mat, at least to try and stay safe. He doesn't always work back to his feet. Sometimes he lies there like a fish. But yeah, I think until I see it, then I find it hard to envisage. Of course, you'll get good odds. So I think we go with decision, but it's definitely something to keep your eye on if it's wide enough. The Vallejos sub, that's a sort of alt bet. So yeah, we unanimously agreed to skip this fight. Cesar Almeida versus Cezary Oleksiejczuk, the brother of Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, and we will move on to Morgan Charriere versus Melky Costa. So yeah, this is currently the closest line fight, I believe, because there's nothing this is literally right now as we're recording this -110 both ways, and that's the only fight. Yeah, it's the only dead even money fight we have. So it's super interesting. Let's take a look at their stats first. This is where I usually like to start, just to remind myself, and then look at their previous fights. So let's go here. So Melky Costa against Morgan Charriere, both well-rounded fighters, both have the ability to grapple and strike. I'd say Charriere slightly better striker, and maybe Melky is slightly better on the ground with jiu-jitsu. There is a height and reach slight disparity, so 2 inches of height for Melky and 2 inches of reach for Melky. Charriere is built like a brick house. He's really stocky and he has a lot of power, and we saw that in his last fight with Nate the Train, which was a fight which was kind of interesting because I feel like Landwehr was winning that fight. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 1-1 going into the third, and Charriere caught him with a beautiful right hand. I think it was a right hook, and just dropped Landwehr. He didn't recover. His fabled chin just didn't hold up, but he was marching forward. Landwehr was marching forward in the third. He's known for his durability, and I think he got caught. It happens. Before that, this was a fantastic fight as well. Charriere versus Wood. I think Wood got the knockdown in the first round, and Charriere kind of survived. I don't know if he ever fully recovered. He got a takedown on Wood, but Wood schooled him, I think, pretty much. Correct me if I'm wrong. And before that, he had Miranda. He had a very close fight with Mariscal, which I watched before we came on, and I thought that was a little bit of a robbery. I thought Charriere won that fight, and I don't remember this one with Manolo Zucchini. Don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on Charriere before I go over to Melky.
I have always backed Charriere when it comes to my write-ups. I have watched him thrive and rise as a fighter when he fought. I think it was in the Aries promotion. I think it was Aries. I gotta maybe say I'm wrong there, but it was some other promotion before the UFC. But his fight against Mariscal is the most freshest in my mind because it's the only one I come back to whenever I see him fight, or whenever I watch tape of him fighting. And it's because Mariscal is a demon uncaged that looks chonky. And so whenever a chunky fighter like Charriere fights another similar built fighter like Mariscal, who both have a frenetic pace and mixed style to them, I kind of get hypnotized by how Charriere fights, because no matter how chaotic a fight can get, he can always adapt and find a sneaky way to counter his opponent. And we saw that when he fought Landwehr with that finishing sequence. We saw that when he fought Mariscal, how he kept sprawling and getting back to his feet and outboxing him every now and then. It's so hard for me to see him lose against Costa. And I know that Costa's like a bit of a hype train at the moment, but when you compare Charriere's five fights against those fighters. Okay, 4, because I mean, who the hell is Zucchini? Compared that to Costa's wins, I mean, it's a fairly incomparable, because
Let's take a look. Let's go across.
Yeah.
Let's bring them up so we can have a look.
Yeah, because I mean, like, Erosa is gone. He's finished as a fighter. I reckon he's pretty much just a filler fighter right now. Rodriguez is fine, but he's always been one of those fighters who has to win by the way that he fights, otherwise he loses. And that's pretty much how that fight went with Costa. Like, the wrestling was there, but then he got up many more times and just out-scrambled him in many ways. Philly, that one was a... Philly, who the hell's Philly anymore, right? Philly's gone. Nuremberg is just another filler name. So what I'm trying to get at before I ramble on like an old man is I just think that Charriere has, you know, done his dues as a fighter, and he's gonna show up and show out. You know, he's gonna show us what he can do against another prospect like Costa. And so that's my one-sided rant. Will, please counter me, because I feel stupid.
I gotcha. I'm going to perfectly tip the scales back the other way. I am a big Morgan Charriere hater. Every time I do a write-up on this guy, I have to talk about the same angle. We started off this breakdown looking at statistics of Morgan Charriere, and those statistics, nothing really stands out. You know, like he's a very well-rounded guy, fights hard for 15 minutes, very competitive losses, as we've seen looking at his recent record. But the one statistic you need to see is looking at the breakdowns of how he wins and loses his fights. He's 13-0 in fights that end by a knockout. He's 3-1 in fights that end by submission. These are all very good. He's a very dangerous man. He is 5-10 in fights that go the distance. How can you be a respected, well-rounded, decent fighter when you watch him? But how can you be 5-10 in decisions?
I was waiting for that.
It's insane. You know. I can't not talk about Charriere and talk about this insane statistic. It's the most like imbalanced, random anomaly of any fighter in the UFC's career. Because you would assume that to be 5-10 in decisions, you have to be like an absolute gas bag who just falls apart in round 3, or has like super low volume, or can't stuff a takedown. But he's none of these things. It's so weird. And like, you know, we talked about his fight against Chepe Mariscal, robbery. I agree. Think Charriere won that fight. I think I backed him in that one. But there's no smoke without fire. You simply cannot have a record as weirdly lopsided with 5 wins and 10 losses by decision. There must be something about his style. Jordan Vucenic, that split decision was a robbery. I think it was during the pandemic or just afterwards. I backed Vucenic and I got away with it. Like, a lot of it I know, again, is like recognizable names on the regional scene in Europe, but like nothing's changed. I still think the same thing of him. And this is why I backed Nathaniel Wood against him at plus money, because Wood is a very respectable minute winner. Anyway, how does that translate to Melky? Melky's a guy who gets finished a fair amount. You're looking at his 7 losses in his career. 4 of them have come by stoppage, which immediately gives Morgan Charriere a chance, because that at this stage, I basically think if you think Charriere wins, you have to assume he's going to finish more often than not. And on the flip side, Melky has a 9-3 record in decisions. And given how well-rounded Melky is, and given the fact that one of his decision wins in the UFC is against Christian Rodriguez, which, as somebody who is a grappler, I think is an incredibly impressive win, because we know how scrappy C-Rod is. Same with Julian Erosa to a lesser extent. So this basically, to me, comes down to a summary of, is there going to be a finish? And the yes or no on that determines who wins the fight, in my opinion. It's not that binary, but I think that's the way you should probably be assuming it goes down. And I think there's equal chance Charriere finishes Melky, an equal chance that Melky wins a decision against Charriere. So a pick'em seems about right to me. Would probably be my overall assessment.
Oh, that's a good breakdown. It's got me thinking about how you might bet it, because I'm undecided. Basically, I'd been trying to go back and forth in my head, and what I think is helpful is, I do think you're right. I think probably there's more finishing, slightly maybe more finishing upside for Charriere, but Melky's going to win the decision, so maybe a Melky decision only. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that prop, but it sounds like an amazing prop. So yeah, Melky decision only, maybe Charriere finish only, but I think Melky is pretty dangerous as well, right? He has a fair number of finishes on his record. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, I don't like the finish loss to Garcia and the finish loss to Thiago Moises, especially that hasn't aged well, the loss to Moises. But I think that was on short notice. That was his debut. I think he took it on very short notice. I think we can write off the Moises loss, because it's always hard coming in on a few days, into the UFC. The Garcia one as well has aged well, and then he's on a 4-fight win streak. And I know you said his wins are not as good as Charriere's wins, and I think that, yeah, but they're in the ballpark, right? They're UFC fighters. I agree. Philly and Arosa pretty washed, but C-Rod undersized. Nuda Becky, he's not great. So I think that's a fair point as well. I think the only interesting thing I noticed, we're going through the stats, because they both had a decent number of UFC fights now. I guess Sherry's only had 5, so maybe it's not super accurate, but it's this. I always like to look at the strikes landed per minute versus the strikes absorbed, because I find it interesting, right, that it's a pretty decent differential. I anything above 1 differential, so like we've got like 1.3 for plus 1.3 for Melky, so he's basically dealing out 1 extra strike, significant strike per minute, and he's absorbing, whereas it's negative for Morgan. So that's not great for Morgan Charriere, but you could write it off with only 5 fights. It's not necessarily going to be accurate. Then everything else is pretty equal except for the takedown defense. So the takedown defense looks to be much higher for Charriere. So I think this is really going to be a case of who gets their game going. If it does stay on the feet for 3 rounds, Charriere might break his his duck in terms of decisions in the UFC. He's never won a decision in the UFC, is that right? No. So he might, or he might get the finish. So yeah, I really haven't. Doing this analysis hasn't helped me come to a decision. So I guess I'm going to rely on the two of you. Hopefully you both. Oh, I think you're on opposite sides, are you? Oh, well, I think we're with Charriere.
Yeah, we are.
Or are you with Melk? Well,
yeah, not with any supreme confidence, but yeah, I pick Melk.
Okay. My initial gut instinct was Costa, because I felt he had more well-roundedness. But seeing the 83% takedown defense, and when I watched that Mariscal fight, he did keep it on the feet really well. But Melk's got good hands. He has got good hands. His boxing, I think, is probably underrated. It's going to be close. Do you know what? I'll just leave it with Charriere. And I guess the problem is we can't really go Charriere decision after that stat. So he's going to have to finish him, basically. It's going to have to be...
I will say something very, very briefly here. When you pointed out the strikes absorbed and the strikes that landed stat between the two fighters, I do think that the reason why Charriere could you go back to that page for a second?
Of course, we can look at the breakdown of the fights that led to that stat.
Oh no, but like just the comparison, the one that you read before. Yep. So
this one.
Yeah, so I believe the main reason why Costa is so different to Charriere is because of the style. Costa likes to type his opponent against the cage. He likes to use the clinch, and so that negates a lot of striking output from his opponents. And because this is significant strikes, whatever his opponents do, it's not very significant, right? So to maybe assist in picking Costa here, like going against my own pick here, I do think that Costa's ability to tie up Charriere against the cage is going to be fairly prevalent, especially since Costa's got the the BJJ background as well. So I do think that controlling Charriere for that duration of 15 minutes also, you know, I do think that Costa via decision is probably more appealing as a pick than Charriere via finish. Like, that's my back pedal.
He's at Shooter Box Gym, which is a good gym. Charles Oliveira's gym. Okay, well, it sounds to me like you're making life easier for us. We're going to go with Costa decision due to the stylistics. He's going to push Charriere up against the cage, wear on his muscle-bound frame, land lots of smaller strikes, and get that strike count up. So he's more of the minute winner, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Which I like, which fits with Will's narrative. So we cracked it. Right, this one. Oh, going to have to rely on one of you two to start this one off.
I mean, I can briefly just say that it's either Nzechukwu by KO or Buchecha by sub, and that's all I got. Will, what do you got?
Wow, I thought you were going to bite the bullet and be the one to take us home on this one, but
No.
fine, fair enough. That's fair enough. It's concise enough, really. Yeah, Buchecha had his debut in July. He came into the UFC as like a respected BJJ guy, pretty impressive stuff. His regional scene footage showed him to be very green. One of those guys who, if he gets you down and he can get his takedowns going, then great, looks really good. But he only landed one takedown against Magny, and he only had 2 minutes. Oh no, he had 5 minutes of control time. Some of that obviously will be crotch sniffing on the takedown because he went 1 for 11 of takedowns. It was pretty underwhelming, but it's exactly what you would have expected with one-dimensional BJJ guy can't get the fight to the floor. You know what happens then? Pretty obvious. So I just think that if you struggled with Martin Badai, who has absolutely no power and is like a 15-minute kind of fighter for heavyweight, how are you going to do against Kennedy and Nzechukwu, who is basically has similar like abilities, but also is a much harder hitter? Kennedy's moved up to heavyweight, and it's been a bit of a genius move, in my opinion, because I mean, you're highlighting the Walter Walker heel hook loss. I mean, that's pretty unforgivable, and it goes against exactly what I'm about to say. But Kennedy's always had the ability to have like lapses in judgment and like bad fight IQ, and I feel like the higher in weight you go, the less that becomes a big issue, because, as I always say, heavyweights can just like override all of the logic by just whacking you in the face with the right hand and putting you to sleep. So I guess Kennedy could do that. So it really just comes down to Kennedy's takedown defense and his fight IQ. We have seen him fight a pure BJJ guy before when he fought Danilo Marquez back in 2021. I'm an absolute encyclopedia. Look at this. Fucking hell. He got grappled for 2 rounds. I think he was basically had his back taken for the first 2 rounds, but he came out in round 3, fought with real urgency for 20 seconds and got his KO, which was pretty impressive stuff. Kennedy's a finisher. He knows what he needs to do, and he knows how to do it. He's never really been out grappled by anybody, as far as I know. Just scrolling through his record, looking for takedown suffered. Darko Stosic got him down 4 times, which is pretty alarming. But aside from that, like, no one really has. Devin Clark only got him down once. I don't know. It feels like Kennedy is a very physically imposing dude. He's massive. If we could compare the sizes between the guys, what we got like height and reach wise on either side.
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
But yeah, whilst you look into that, I think, Kennedy, much heavier hitter, much better striker. It's just a case of whether or not he can fight for as long as he needs to without like self-destructing and getting taken down, because I do think he probably is in danger if he does get taken down. But in MMA, you need much more. You can't have BJJ as your only base, and I think 1 for 11 in takedowns against Martin Badai kind of demonstrates that this is a tricky one. So I'm not convinced. I'm surprised it's only -150. But yeah, Kennedy and Nzechukwu is probably the pick for me.
I didn't realize that was the odds. Let's go look at the odds. Scroll down a bit for this one, I think. Oh no, sorry, it's just here. Yeah, you're right, -150. So actually money's coming in on Buchecha. So Kennedy opened up -200.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I had it at -200 when I broke it down because all fights start standing, especially heavyweight fights. The fight can end in an instant when it comes to the standing. That favors Kennedy. Kennedy's much more experienced. He's bigger. Buchecha has done absolutely nothing in his career to demonstrate, firstly, being in the UFC, and secondly, being competitive price against a veteran. Like, how many fights has Nzechukwu had in the UFC? Loads. I don't know. I struggle to see any sort of like trump card that really gives Buchecha a strong advantage here, like that he can actually achieve without question marks. So I don't get -150, but I also would absolutely hate the idea of betting -150 on Kennedy and Nzechukwu when he fucking loses. So yeah, tough decisions.
One thing I do want to say here that has kind of rang my brain for some reason is that Nzechukwu comes from Fortis MMA, and the coach there is Saif Sayud, and we have heard of his voice all year for the past 10 years, screaming out instructions, And I think that's going to be pretty important because we do know that Buchecha has a fairly linear game plan in getting Nzechukwu to the ground, and you're going to hear from Sayud for the duration of the fight, right? And that's important. I'm not saying that's going to be bad for Nzechukwu because he's getting taken down anyway, but the ability for most Fortis MMA fighters to adapt mid-fight and win rounds back in round 2 or 3 is pretty prevalent. I mean, if you look at the Fortis MMA roster here, I got up here, you got Alex Morono, who is historically good at bouncing back from a bad first round. We've got Damon Jackson, who is also fairly good at gritting out that first round and then coming back and just adapting to his opponent's game plan a bit. Essentially, any time that you hear Saif Sayud coach, and we will hear him coach when these two fight, we are going to see a big change in not style, but like game planning or adjustments from Nzechukwu after that first round. So I'm not one to talk about odds. I am the least known person or least likely person to even talk about betting here. But Buchecha via sub round 1 is probably going to be a hot bet to take. But then anytime afterwards, like a Nzechukwu KO round 2 or 3, that's probably going to be my most likely spot to, take or like recommend or whatever. So that's my rant or yap and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's good. And what I took from that is probably, if you're interested in live betting, it's probably best to wait and see what happens after in round 1, and if Kennedy survives it, then he maybe will get the knockout later on, and you could take like you mentioned, a double chance Kennedy knockout, Buchecha sub, something like that. So we think the pick is Kennedy and probably a KO if he survives an early grappling onslaught.
Easy.
The next fight is one we have to hand it to Will, I think, women's MMA expert in residence. This is Amanda Lemos taking on Gillian Robertson. So are you sticking with your girl, Will?
I appreciate that you remember that Gillian Robertson is my girl, because I was going to say there's been a lot of pro Mackenzie Dern talk in the last few months, but you have to come home, and Gillian Robertson is my girl. I think so. This is like as binary a matchup as it gets. Always the case when it's Amanda Lemos, great striker, absolute fish out of water on the mat. Gillian Robertson, bang average striker, I guess you could say, fish out of water on the feet, but very good grappler. I think Robertson's really improved her wrestling, which, again, going back to that last fight very, very briefly, that's exactly all it takes. It's if you have very good grappling, just focus on your wrestling. And ironically, again, to really wrap that up and make it a 3-dimensional point, Mackenzie Dern, worst example we've ever seen of somebody who just never involved their wrestling. But Gillian Robertson did, so shout out to her. So she's always been so intense. She's always been so finish reliant, like not reliant, but she's always been very capable of finding a finish when she gets things to the mat. And I think that she really will have a great time if she gets on top of Amanda Lemos, because Lemos's mentality when taken down is very similar to that of Marina Rodriguez, in that she will consolidate the position. Doesn't matter the fact that she's going to lose the round, but it gives her an opportunity to stay safe and then come back in the next one and build that base and try to get herself back into the fight with her striking. And I just don't think I trust Amanda Lemos enough from a takedown perspective. I think that she has basically a puncher's chance. It's a pretty significant puncher's chance, because I think she's going to have to be Robertson's going to have to be very careful with her entry and very concise in making sure that she's in and out and that she gets that takedown very, very quickly after she attempts it, because this is going to be a very dangerous one for her on the feet. So it's a pretty binary fight, but I think women's MMA also does not lean towards it being a pure 50-50. When we were just talking about the last fight, again, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, all fights start standing, and at 265 pounds, the ability to end the fight in an instant absolutely favors the striker. But, in the women's division here, it's not a guarantee that even if Lemos gets 3 minutes of striking in round one from the get-go, it's no guarantee that she finishes Gillian Robertson, and she could still get taken down in minute 3 and lose the round that way. So it's not quite a completely balanced 50-50, which is why Gillian Robertson's a bit of a favourite. I think she deserves to be, because she has finishing and damage equity on her side if she does get her takedowns. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like there's quite clearly a favourite here, but there's a little bit of buyer beware, because Gillian Robertson definitely can lose this fight. I think it's lined correctly. I think it's an apt kind of like breakdown for a pretty binary matchup. But I will side with Robertson. I think she really has evolved in the last couple of years. And Lemos is also quite old as well by comparison. And the book really has been written. Robertson's quite smart. She's got Dean Thomas in her corner. They're quite a cerebral duo, the two of them. They like to do a lot of kind of evaluating their fighters and their opponents and picking holes where they need to. And I think there's a lot of tape out there on Lemos and how to get her to the mat and ground her. And I think Gillian Robertson rises to the occasion and gets it done. How about you guys? Anyone want to tell me I'm wrong and that I'm biased because Gillian Robertson's my girl?
No. You're good. You covered every base that I was gonna point out. I mean, Robertson was like the OG grappler whilst Ronda was around, right? Like she was the strawweight queen in that regard, and so I'm just keen to see her grapple again. She has such good grappling. You pretty much covered it all, really. So well done. Props to you. Thanks for doing that job. And yeah. Cool. What about you, Dom?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the puncher's chance thing, and I've been burned a few times the last few events on puncher's chance. It's happening again and again. Not saying that's going to happen here, but just looking to see last time Gillian was actually stopped. It was like you'd have to go back. Wow, she's actually never been knocked out. I can see. Sorry, Macy Barber knocked her out in 2019. So Macy Barber was the last one to knock her out. So yeah, it's been a long time. She's been winning fights pretty consistently since she switched weight class. I believe she moved down in weight. Is that right? So she would have lost to Macy at 125, and now she's looked big and strong at 115. I imagine, that Lemos is. So yeah, maybe there's value on the Gillian line here. Because let's have a look. We've got plus 150 on Lemos. Yeah, open pick'em. Wow, be good it would have been nice to have Gillian Robertson at a pick'em. And then it shot up to plus 150. But I think that's not correct. I think it's plus 130 now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, just simply looking through Lemos's record, she's trading wins and losses, and it's literally grappler or striker. Yeah. Tatiana Suarez, she lost, grappler. Yasmin Lucindo, she won, but to be fair, it was a weird anomaly in that Lemos was grappling her for 2 rounds. Jandiroba, grappler, she lost. Mackenzie Dern is a grappler, but doesn't know how to get her grappler going, so I would say striker. Zhang Weili grappled her for like 20-something minutes. Marina Rodriguez, striker. Like it's literally like the binary of does this person grapple? If so, win.
And does Lemos give up subs? Because maybe the sub angle is live. She's given up a couple of subs.
Really, she's given up a few, but it's like she's gotten really good at like in that third round against Yasmin Lucindo. When she gets taken down, she just like consolidates position. I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think that's the angle for the fight that I don't want to take, is whether or not Robertson finishes her, because sometimes it's so tricky, isn't it, when you have a submission-based fighter and they have that top control time, but the opponent is just locking it down and there's just nothing that can be done, and you're sat there like begging for a submission, but it's just top control time.
Yeah,
I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah,
I don't think you get a massive side of the way as well. I imagine that Robertson's like the balance between her submission prop and her decision prop will be almost 50-50. So I mean, take the bigger price is what I would say, but
it could be a case of playing the Gillian money line, but also playing that if they misprice the decision, I could see that being priced similarly just because of Lemos's KO record. Maybe you can increase exposure that way, and then if she gets the finish, you benefit a little bit, and if she doesn't, if it goes to decision, you've still got the money line, something like that. I think I feel pretty convinced on Gillian Robertson. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that 2 weeks ago on November the 19th, this was a bout between Yasmin Lucindo and Gillian Robertson, and Lucindo failed a drug test, and therefore shortly after this time Lemos stepped in, so she can have no longer than 2 weeks notice. Now I saw somewhere in some spiel that she's one of these fighters who stays ready, but really it's a disadvantage, I think. So yeah, bear that in mind when you're thinking about this fight. So let's go to the pick page. We are going with Robertson. You know, if you wanted to do a Josh, you could say it's a KO, ground and pound finish.
No,
her ground and pound is nasty. I'm just saying, if you wanted to go for that, the angle, like the wide angle, if you want to get the good odds, it would be she gets her in top mount and she can't answer back or crucifix. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen,
but I mean, I was gonna be 100% on the sub here. Like, I mean, I can't see, even if there was ground and pound. Like, I was like, yeah, it'll only open up the opportunity to like get a sub, right? So like, I was like, oh no, he's gonna say he's gonna get KO because of me. I'm like, no, it's a sub.
No, I mean it was my own idea. It was like in your vein, in the vein of your previous suggestion is what I meant. Like, it was my suggestion that she could finish, because she has. Gillian Robertson has finished people that way before, I think. Ground and pound. She's done it.
Little tidbit. My second ever breakdown I ever wrote when covering MMA in 2019, when she finished Sarah Frota. I tipped her to win by KO at plus 1200. And from that moment, a relationship was born between me and women's MMA.
Her last two finishes are, by the way, I described, so it's not that. Look, punches from back control, ground strikes from back mount, rest of decisions.
Fine. I apologize. You were right. Fair enough.
No, I wanted it to be something which was, hopefully priced quite far out, so you could take it as like, like a 20-1 or something. But yeah, I think submission's very live, but also I would say decision is the most likely, right, Will? Because she just controls her. Like you say, Lemos just stays safe, just does enough, threatens for the first minute of each round and gets taken down, hopefully.
If I'm honest, I think that what you just said about the whole 2 weeks short notice, that does make me lean a little bit more towards a finish for Robertson, if I'm honest, just because I think Lemos needs to have spent a lot of time working hard on takedown defense and like escapes, etc., etc. And I feel like she's relying on her base ability here, which is not that good. So I feel like maybe I lean more towards submission here now.
Yeah, plus Lemos isn't really a cardio queen, right? Like she's very physical with her output. She's not very conservative. So if she panics on the ground, that's just going to waste more energy. Yeah,
I think she throws a kitchen sink at her early, but then after that, she's probably going to fall apart, isn't she?
What I like out of Gillian Robertson when I watched her, because I've paid attention since I've been interacting with you, Will, it sort of increased my attention in women's fights and definitely Gillian fights. And she's very intelligent. Like, she does follow what's her coach's Dean Thomas. She does follow Dean Thomas's advice, and I've noticed that it's increasing her confidence in her stand-up, so that she knows if I'm confident in my stand-up, the takedowns will come if I commit to my strikes. She doesn't waste any time. She throws with pop and then she goes straight in for the takedowns. And I expect her to do that here. Don't want to see a Ryan Loader performance where it's sort of like in between. I'm not sure if I'm shooting or striking. She knows that I am striking, like, to begin with, and I will land. It's that thing about when you see these wrestlers like Grant Dawson and they're circling, they're not committing to their strikes. There's like tiptoeing around. It's like if you just commit to your strikes just once, you might get the opportunity to shoot, whereas you're definitely not going to get it. Tiptoeing around the edge, being afraid of throwing. So I've never seen that in Gillian. I see very like confident striking with entries. So yeah, because you just mentioned the first round, that's always the scariest part of fighting Amanda Lemos, is that first round when she's live. But I don't see it. So I think that Gillian will get the takedown. And yeah, the cardio thing will be a concern because she's 38. Is that right? 38. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, definitely late 30s.
I always prefer it when they can just put the
age. Yeah.
So Gillian's 30. Gillian's like prime now. Prime of her career. Although I know, like you said, she's been around a long time. So yeah, 38. Okay, we made it easy on ourselves. We'd already decided. Sorry. Robertson submission.
Is it a sub or is it a KO? Like, I'm still cautious about that. Like, I'm cool with either. Like, you did point out the ground and pound finishes, so I'm like, I mean, look.
Yeah. What do you reckon? Round one? If it's a sub, it's probably round one. If it's a TKO, I think it'll be later.
Round two.
Yeah. What Will said.
Round two submission or KO.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. I call it. It's not often I have an opinion on rounds, is it? I'm always like, I'm in an RM, but she takes her time. I think if you were to look at, like, I can't actually confirm it, but like, I'm sure if you go through her finishes, there's a lot of round 2s and 3s.
Well, her last 3 finishes were all in round 2, but she did get her last 4 finishes round 2. Let's go back further. Let's see that. Yeah, last 4 finishes. She finishes Priscilla Cachoeira in round 1. But last 4
anyone can finish her in the first round. Like a light Paul can finish her in the first round. Come on. It's Cachoeira for God's sake.
I think maybe go with the round 2. Just go with round 2.
Yeah.
Don't choose the method because it's 2 and 2 for the last. She's gone with the TKO the last 2, and then before that 2 subs. So maybe just play round 2. Probably get a good number on that.
Oh, we're cooking. We are cooking.
See, look. It's 2 Marina Rodriguez, 2 Poliana Viana, round 2 Piera Rodriguez, round 2 Myra Agapova. Yeah. Right, let's go back. Got a couple more that we wanted to talk about. We're gonna end on the Neil Magny fight briefly, but before that, we're going to talk about Joanderson Brito against Melsik Bhagdasaryan. So let's go into this. Yeah, so this should be a good fight. This is, it's not a great card, but there are some like sneaky fights which could be entertaining, could be fun. Joanderson Brito is extremely unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get from him. He's lost his last 2. He lost to Pat Sabatini where he got grappled for 3 rounds, and he lost to a close split decision against William Gomez. I think that was somewhat controversial. Gomez did his French savant style where he just sort of in and out, stayed on the outside, skirted around, and Brito is like a bull in a china shop. He walks forward. He's a bit of a madman, throws wild, and has some ability to grapple you and sub you if he feels like it. Depends which way the wind's blowing. Yeah, he beat Jack Shaw, and I believe I bet Jack Shaw there, and he did a number on him. Yeah, cut on shin. So he had some nasty leg kicks, opened up a massive gash on Jack Shaw's leg. It had to be stopped, but I don't think that Jack Shaw was going to win that fight the way it was going. Before that, had a bet on JSP. JSP was doing a number on Brito and somehow managed to annoy him and got choked out. But he was having grappling success against Brito there. And Weston Wilson, the less said about that fight, the better. Then we go on the other side, Melsik Bhagdasaryan. Yeah, not much to say on Melsik because he's not had that many UFC fights. So we look at his record. I think he's been in the UFC a while, but he's been relatively inactive. He joined the UFC. He's had 5 fights in the UFC, dating back to 2021. He's a kickboxer, so he's doesn't really do any attempts at taking people down. Beat Colin Anglin, Bruno Souza, lost to Josh Kulabau, I think this was an upset, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think people were expecting Josh Kulabau to win that. Should we have a look at that one?
I remember that fight really well. It was a fluky finish as well. Like, I think they both threw a kick and it like knocked Melsik down to the mat, and Kulabau fell on top of him and fell into the back take. It was like the most fortunate back take he's ever had. He literally, like, by the time he hit the mat, he was like, holy shit, I'm like 1 second away from a rear naked choke, and then just choked him out. It was really weird.
Well, that was an even money fight. I don't remember that sequence actually, but now you're mentioning it, so it was a case of maybe slightly against the run of play, or just it was even at that point.
It was quite early on, but I think Melsik took round 1 and was showing himself to be the superior striker, but then just chaos ensued.
Yeah, then he went on to beat Tucker Lutz in a decision fight. And of course, then he had an absence, right? So this was the issue, right? This is the only point that I wanted to bring up, because I was thinking about this. I know people are really... I'm always trying to fade Brito, so I'm not going to do it this time, because he has the grappling upside. So we know that if you can take this guy down, this Melsik guy down, then it's probably... But, it's always hard to judge someone on their first fight back, especially on your first fight back, you get Jean Silva. I mean, talk about drawing the short straw. And yeah, he got colded in round 1. And I think Jean Silva was like goading him as well, to make matters worse. So the time off was exactly 2 years to the month. So July 2023 to Feb 25, so not quite 2 years. And now he's coming back 10 months later, or 9 months later, and he has another short straw here. It's a tough ask. I don't think anyone's going to be making a good case for Melsik. Just wanted to say that, what I've seen of him on the feet is he can strike. He seems pretty tough. Yeah, I think he could be live. I don't know what the odds are at the moment. I don't know if you guys have any countering to support Melsik, because it's a pretty obvious Joanderson Brito pick, isn't it?
I have a very big soft spot for Melsik Bhagdasaryan here. A little bit of history about me. I've been predicting fights for about 10 years now, and I nearly had my worst night of predicting fights ever when UFC Fight Night Hall versus Strickland was happening back in 2021. I was losing every single fight in my picks until Bhagdasaryan came along and knocked out Colin Anglin in the second round, and so he saved my ass from a negative clean sweep and dirty sweep, I guess. And so I have a soft spot for Bhagdasaryan, but ever since his knockout loss against Jean Silva, I can't see him winning again. Like, that chin is a bit suspect to me, and against a raging bull that is Joanderson Brito, I do not think that outside of a extremely clean and perfect performance, which is not really ever happening these days, I can't see my guy Bhagdasaryan, win. And I dread watching this fight, because I just want nothing but good stuff from that guy, and he's not gonna win. I just can't see him winning against Brito. So that's my sob as fuck story. What about you guys?
I'll keep it really light. I just think that Brito has the style to make Melsik's life difficult, but Melsik doesn't have the style to make Brito's difficult. I mean, to a certain extent, I think that Bhagdasaryan kind of likes distance. He likes to kickbox and like fight a little bit on the prettier side. And we saw in that Jean Silva fight that, like, when they got in close and it turned into a kind of like a phone booth fight, there was real superiority on Silva's side. I mean, there's just general superiority. Silva's a much better fighter, but I think Brito can emulate a lot of what Jean Silva was doing with that kind of like junkyard dog kind of aggressiveness, like I don't think he'll bark at him like Jean Silva did, but I think Silva was like really disrupting the flow of the fight by just sort of dicking around. And I think Melsik just seemed quite rattled by how much pressure he was being put under, and how sort of like the fight just wasn't looking pretty in the way that he might want it to be. And I think Brito can probably emulate that. So yeah, I think Melsik's going to have put on a near perfect performance to win this one. I think he's going to have to do like 15 minutes of Matador, which is quite tough, especially where are we? We're in the Apex, aren't we? Because this is a fight night card. So, yeah, definitely some advantages on Brito's side. So I can understand why he's a favourite. I think he's like minus 250 at the moment, which is a bit steep for Brito considering he's laid an egg and shat the bed a few times, but he should get the job done.
Yeah, I haven't got anything to say. I did bet Sabatini against Brito. I want to say I've not just bet losers against him, so I did get the Sab one. But yeah, I can't back Melsik, unfortunately. I'm done with trying to back dogs which don't have the bite, and that last loss to Silva was extremely disappointing. I agree. So, how do you think Brito gets it done? Is it a KO, or can Melsik sort of make it close? Maybe eke out a decision loss.
I have a feeling it's going to be a KO because I feel like after a loss like that recent knockout against Silva, he might be a bit too timid, maybe a bit too susceptible to getting punched in the face. And so, yeah, I reckon there's going to be a KO. I reckon also it's going to be in the first round. Like that's my thought there. Like it's just going to be a very quick fight, and we'll see a huge gap in output from both fighters, and Brito's going to be the more dominant fighter.
I got a sneaky feeling that we could see a submission from Brito here. I know he usually does it in the form of like reactively guillotining, but he did take down William Gomez 3 times, and I think a lot of that came from the frustration of having to play Matador. I think eventually he just kind of reached a point where he was like, let me just pin this guy against the fence and take him down. And I think if he gets on top of Melsik, I know I kind of like was dismissive of that finish that Josh Kulabau had against Bhagdasaryan, but I'm sure if you were to rewatch that, you probably could find fault in Melsik's ability to just give up his neck in a mere matter of seconds. So submission could be interesting considering I think people forget that Brito's got those in his locker and that they think that he's like a, like pure like John Lineker kind of fighter.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea. What about you, Josh? You happy to go with the sub?
Yeah, I'll tap it out and say, okay, I agree.
He's pretty powerful, right? So I think if it's going to be a sub, he could just snatch up a standing Gillian round 1.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that.
The last fight we wanted to talk about was Neil Magny, because we didn't want to leave off a car breakdown without talking about our precious Neil Magny, who cashed us against Jake Matthews. We talked about that here on the pod, and Will rightly backed Neil Magny at odds of like 5-1. I also tailed that bet, and so yeah, we'll go with Neil Magny.
Jesus, that quickly, okay. God.
I didn't see that coming. That's funny.
We're definitely going to talk about this a little bit, yeah.
I was going to say, does anyone have anything to say about Amosov? Like, I don't know. I mean, yeah,
I got nothing
take it away.
Analytical to say, nothing like that. But I feel like Magny's time is done. I mean, I know that I've said that many times now in this podcast, but I am still salty about the whole Matthews and Magny situation. that pissed me off so much, and so outside of that, I like Amosov here. I did point him out as a lock of mine this week, and so I do think that. I mean, I can't move from Amosov now. That I think is a lock, right? So, yeah, that's my short, uncaring, blasé attitude towards this fight. What about you guys?
But how do you think Amosov is going to win this fight?
Fuck if I know. I really don't. It's probably going to be a finish. Because typically, whenever a fight goes the distance, Magny kind of just survives and thrives. But yeah, KO. I say questioning my existence also. Like I don't know. Like I'm just on Amosov. That's all. It's the most laziest breakdown ever. But this whole fight just feels like the whole UFC trying to get rid of Magny kind of fight, right? So yeah. Help. It's like, what, Will, Dom, what do you guys got?
I haven't got any advances. Just to say that Amosov, someone I'm not very familiar with, obviously he said he's coming from Bellator. We took a brief look at his record before we came on, and there are some very high level wins there, familiar names. I think it's worth pointing those out at the very least for the audience. So, I mean, look at his record is stunning too. I mean, he's 18-1, 8-1 in Bellator. His only loss came recently, so he was an undefeated fighter up until. Sorry, I mean he's 28-1, not 18-1. He's 28-1, 8-1 in Bellator with wins over Douglas Lima, who's a very talented fighter. We also noted Roberto Soldic, who has a win over DDP, and Eric Silva, who was in the UFC. So yeah, there are some definitely notable names here. There is this kind of fear about betting on people coming over from Bellator, but I think this might not be the one to have any fear. So KO round 1.
Oh,
We've seen that before with Morales.
I suppose so. Whenever it comes to me being very unsure, I always personally go with like a round 2, just to, kind of lessen the blow if it's wrong. I don't know. So
yeah,
I mean, if you think a round 1's there, then I reckon let's ride.
I think it comes down to Magny, doesn't it? Usually Magny, if he's going to crumble, doesn't he crumble in round 1? Let's look at his losses.
Yeah, I think so. He pulls it on late. If he's still there halfway through the fight, then he makes people shit themselves. But yeah, if you get him out of there early, that's the way.
Prates knocked him out in round 1. Michael Morales knocked him out in round 1. He got subbed in round 1 by Gilbert Burns. If you're gonna finish Neil Magny, you're gonna do it early by the looks of things. Subbed by Rafael dos Anjos in round 1. He doesn't tend to lose. Oh yeah, all his losses, they're early. You have to go back quite far. It was Damien Meyer who subbed him in round 2, and that was in God knows when, 2015, a decade ago.
Jeez,
he's never lost.
right.
So if it goes round 2 with, if you're live betting, it might be time to sprinkle a bit of Neil Magny.
All right. Well, I mean, in that case, round 1 sounds good to me.
Nothing is set in stone, but yeah, this guy is everything that he's cracked up to be, which hasn't worked out so well for Aaron Pico and Patchy Mix. Then, yeah, be careful with your bets this week. Let's save it. Let's lock it in. As always, these are our early leans. They're our picks. They're not our bets. We're going to be back in a few days' time with our bets on the card, our recap from UFC 323. And yeah, we're hoping you join us for the next one. Sorry, I wrapped up kind of suddenly.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Absolutely knackered.
It's like
I had to
43
get
degrees in my
my-
room, so I'm melting. Yeah, it's so hot.
Stop recording. Yeah, I had to get up like pretty